All right, thank you for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Catherine. I'm one of the event hosts here located in Portland, Oregon at Powell City of Books. Before we begin, I want to encourage you all to check out our upcoming lineup of upcoming and virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. And remind you, you can follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok to stay up to date with all of our fun antics here in the City of Books. Tonight, this is my first event of the year, so I'm really excited. But tonight, for the first event of 2022 that I'm working, we are so excited to welcome local debut author, André Lewis Carter. André Lewis Carter is a Navy retiree who writes fiction, poetry, essays, and plays in the urban sprawl of Portland. He is a freelance editor, voice actor, and a reader for Hippocampus magazine and books. His short stories have appeared in Soft Cartel, Page and Spine, and Down in the Dirt magazines. And he is here to join us tonight for his debut novel, which just came out today, which is called Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. In the debut novel, The Vietnam War is Raging, the US Navy has only recently begun the process of integration, and the country is reeling from racial turmoil and unrest. So why does Cesar, a street tough kid of Afro-Cuban descent, enlist in the Navy? He is on the run from a life of crime and from Mr. Mike, a charismatic sociopathic gangster who was once a mentor but has now turned on him. Escaping into the Navy, wrestling with his history of racism and sexism, Cesar soon sees the absurdity of certain prejudices that seem as old as the US Armed Forces. When he is deployed aboard the USS Kitty Hawk, racial tensions are high and are moving quickly towards violence. Through it all, Cesar's ever-growing sense of honor and self-worth forces him to make moral decisions he never knew he was capable of. It's a fortitude he will desperately need. Tonight, André will be joined in conversation by Kaylie Jones. Kaylie Jones has published several books, including a memoir, Lies My Mother Never Told Me, and her most recent novel, The Anger Meridian. Jones has been teaching for more than 25 years as a faculty member in both the Stony Brook Southampton MFA in Creative Writing and Literature program, and in Wilkes University MFA and Creative Writing program. She is the editor of Long Island Noir and the imprint curator of Kaylie Jones Books, which published this book right here. Tonight's event will include a Q&A portion. So make sure if you want to ask a question to drop it in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. That way Kaylie doesn't have to search through the entire chat function for that. And if you see a question that you also want to know the answer to, make sure to give it a thumbs up so that way it jumps to the top of the queue. And lastly, I would like you to consider supporting Powell's Books and Kaylie and André by purchasing their books and from Powell's. And I'll be posting the links throughout the event. And André was nice enough to sign so many copies of this book, which make a great gift. So that way, if you pick up a book, most likely it will be autographed. Now, please give a warm welcome to André Lewis Carter and Kaylie Jones. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted, and it's really an honor to be here with you, André, and to be hosted by Powell's. It's a wonderful, I feel like we hit the jackpot.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, thanks to Powell's for, it was a shock that they said, well, sure.
Well, André, before we get started, you're going to read for us. I've wanted to ask you questions for a long time. And my first one was today, I was trying to remember when we started working on this project, which was your thesis from the Wilkes program. Yeah. And also I wanted to ask you, I was never in the Navy. I'm a Army family all the way back to, we had spies in the Revolutionary War. Yeah. And so Army all the way. And I was, really touched and honored that you asked me to be your mentor for this book. And I know since you handed in your thesis, you've written several more drafts of this book. You worked really, really hard to get it where you wanted it to be. So all told, how long did you work on the book?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
How long did it take you all told to write the book?
All told, I even though I had an idea maybe 10 years ago, but once I got to Wilkes and started looking at what I wanted to write about, it changed completely. So I pretty much started in 2016. I started writing the book, started thinking about it, and I started out with a character and a situation. I didn't outline it or any of that. It's just, okay, let's see where the idea and where this character takes me. And about 2019 is when it was finished.
That seems right to me. And every draft got more and more interesting and better. One of the questions that we had originally discussed was this event on the Kitty Hawk, which is a very famous event, or
Yeah.
infamous event, I should say, where there really was a race ride on the Kitty Hawk. And it was, hugely, it was all over the news and so on. And
Yeah,
you
this
didn't
is
want,
actually the 50th anniversary.
wow, it's the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know that you didn't want the whole focus of the book is not about that event, though. The book is
No.
really about this young man's journey.
Yeah.
And did you mind from your own experience when you were writing Cesar's story? I know he's not you,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of the certainly for those of you who don't know yet, it starts in late 1971. So that period, and I enlisted in 75, and even then, the events that happened on Kitty Hawk were still reverberating through the Navy and led to a lot of changes. So, yeah, as far as putting myself in the time and some of the things that the character had to deal with, I had to deal with. So, yeah.
And you picked that year particularly for a specific reason.
Well, yeah, I was amazed at how basically in writing the book from 2016 on, it really struck me how similar the time period 71 was to the time period I was living in now, 2016 to 2020. That's from my notes here, but the inspirations, there are so many parallels between now and that time period. You could like, we're dealing with institutional racism then, we're dealing with it now, the misogyny in the military then and now. You could parallel the Black Power movement to Black Lives Matter, the feminist movement to the Me Too movement. We had the unpopular war in Vietnam to the unpopular war in Afghanistan. So, and of course, we had an unpopular president in Nixon and an unpopular president with former President Trump. So that was, as I was writing, that really came into fore and really influenced what I was writing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty incredible too, sort of the foresight of that, because when we started off with this project, it was sort of before it, this all came to a head. I mean, I was already horrified when it all, from the very beginning of that administration, but the fact that it paralleled so strongly was really amazing to me.
Yeah.
As I was reading your drafts and reading your book.
Mhm.
So do you want to read a little bit, and then we will come back and let the audience ask questions, and I have plenty more questions if they
I
do
would be
have.
thrilled, happy.
I will disappear while you read, and I'll come right back as soon as you're done.
Okay. Okay, just to set it up, this is, as I said, late November 1971. This is after the protagonist, Cesar, has gone into a recruiting office and he's trying to talk the recruiter, whose name is Cesar, into enlisting him in the Navy like right away. Cesar thought back to how he had fallen into the trap society had so carefully laid for him. Subtle suggestions from teachers and counselors, along with the school curriculum, had told him that he was only fit for a vocation. He was never going to be college material. He should just accept this fact and become a mechanic or work at McDonald's. The subtext beneath the message was that his only real option was to live the street life. The idea being that you will likely end up dead or in prison, but at least you will have lived life on your own terms. Such bullshit. But it was bullshit that made sense when he factored in Mr. Mike, a straight up gangster who had the soft spot for neighborhood kids, especially fatherless boys, of which there were far too many. It was fertile recruiting ground. Cesar's father had abandoned his young family by dying shortly after their arrival from Cuba in 1958. Cesar the Elder had not been a rich man, but he had supported the government. And that, along with being a floor manager in the cigar factory, made him part of the bourgeoisie and a target of the revolution. When they fled on the last plane out of Cuba, Cesar the Younger was 4 years old. He was excited to be taking a trip on an airplane. None of his friends had ever been on one, and he couldn't wait to brag about it, especially to Enrique, who was always talking about going out on his father's boat and how none of the rest of them ever went out to sea like he did. Cesar didn't know that Enrique would be the only one of his childhood friends he would ever see again, although it would be many years later. His mother, Annabelle, was a good Cuban wife, so she accepted her husband's unusual decision after they received asylum not to join the other expatriated Cubans around Miami. Cesar the Elder had chosen to move to Orlando, which advertised less crime. He didn't understand that crime in poor neighborhoods was rarely given newspaper or television coverage in America because no one wanted to be reminded during dinner that the nation was a world leader in producing such neighborhoods. Despite little support after her husband died, Annabelle continued to honor his decision by refusing to move to an exclusively Afro-Cuban community. She was a strong woman. She was strong enough to marry a nationalist when her mind already belonged to the revolution because her heart belonged to him. And she was her mother's daughter in spite of herself. She had married this man and would stand beside him, not behind him. She was strong enough to swallow her pride and work as a maid in the homes of Cuban aristocrats who were strangling the nation. It was something Cesar the Younger heard his parents argue about often. His father didn't want his wife working, and she grated under the chaff of living up to appearances. Coming into the house one day, Cesar heard Annabelle scream, "You're just a fucking floor manager, not a jefe." The boy turned and retreated outside. Of course, the fighting had a silver lining, according to his mother. After one particularly mean-spirited tussle, the makeup sex had resulted in Cesar the Younger. Both parents had been stunned. They were good Catholics who fucked like rabbits between arguments, but after numerous miscarriages, his mother had been told that she would never be able to carry a child to term. He was a miracle baby. There was no way Annabelle could ever leave this man, no matter how short-sighted he was. Over his protests, she returned to work as soon as possible. For Annabelle, it now became a matter of practicality. They needed the money. His mother gladly watched her mother gladly watched the child. She was so happy to have a grandchild from her only daughter that Annabelle practically had to pry her mother's fingers from the baby to take him home. It almost broke Annabelle's heart when they left their parents behind to flee to America. As her mother's daughter, she was doing what she was trained to do. The taste of it was only slightly bitter because she had a son. Cesar grimaced when he thought about how much he had disappointed his mother over the years. Cesar looked like he was losing interest. Then his right eyebrow rose. "Where you from, man?" "South Side." Seagar's eyes widened briefly. "You know where Sullivan Boulevard is?" "Yeah, it's 2 streets over from where I grew up." Cesar shook his head slowly. "Well, I'll be damned. I stayed there with my mom and sister until I got the fuck out. I took this job so I could talk my mom into moving." "Damn, how's that going?" Cesar chuckled. "Not so good. That's her house, you know." "I heard that, man. Women can be hard-headed, even older women. No offense." Cesar waved it aside. "Damn. So you a homeboy. Shit, I guess that means I can't let your stupid ass get shot down. Are you really ready to leave all the bullshit behind?" "Yeah, man. I mean, I know there's a better life out there for me. I just need some way to grab it." After looking into Cesar's eyes for a moment, Cesar opened a drawer and removed 4 sheets of paper and a number 2 pencil. He set them on the desk. "You have 30 minutes to fill this out for my mark." Cesar looked back at the large window and said, "You think we can close the blinds and turn the lights down? I don't want to cause you no trouble." "Then you shouldn't have walked your ass in here. Get ready." Cesar opened the top drawer and pulled out a loaded .45 caliber pistol that he laid on the desk. "In case your friends show up." "Are you ready?" Cesar's eyes wide. What? I need to know if you have a brain, son. First impressions ain't in your favor. Don't make me repeat myself. Cesar pulled off his remaining glove and dropped both to the floor. Pulling his seat closer, he picked up the pencil. Cesar instructed him to write his name, address, and social security number, then to put the pencil down. Cesar did as he was told. Looking back at the clock, Cesar said, "You have 30 minutes from when I say start. When I say stop, put the pencil down no matter where you are. This test is about quality, not quantity. Okay? Start." Cesar picked up the pencil and began. The test was a lot like the GED exam he had just taken a few weeks ago. He was starting the fourth page when Petty Officer Cesar told him to stop. It had been a lightning quick half hour. Cesar read over the test, his eyebrows occasionally rising and falling. "Not too bad, Mr. Alvarez. You don't quite qualify for a technical job, but there's plenty of other shit you can do." Cesar was looking at the patch on Cesar's left sleeve. It was a rectangular shape with a black background, two white cross flags with a white eagle above, and what looked like three red V's below. "Does that stand for what you do?" Cesar glanced at his arm and back to Cesar. "That's right. I'm a signalman. It's one of the oldest maritime jobs in the Navy." Cesar sat straighter in his chair. Drumming his fingers on the desk, Cesar considered the young man before him. He saw an earnestness in Cesar that told him the kid could be a good sailor. In truth, a young man like him was a godsend right about now. The recruiter had been behind on his recommended quota since he took over the office, but he wasn't alone. Most recruiters, with the exception of some in the Midwest and the southern states, were having trouble reaching quotas. The anti-war sentiment ran high on both coasts. That Cesar was a street thug didn't much matter to Cesar, not when court judges were sending actual criminals into the military, giving them the choice of male or volunteering to serve their country. What mattered to Cesar was Cesar's desire to escape the street life. Hell, he might do just fine. "So why did you choose that job?" Cesar asked. "You get to spend a lot of time outdoors, but you're really the voice of the ship. Before we had radios, signalmen sent and received all the messages for ships at sea. Even today, we'd still send visual messages if using radios would give the ship's position away. So you learn semaphore and flags, maintain equipment, and enjoy the sunshine. Do you have a good memory?" Cesar thought back to his early days as a runner for Mr. Mike. Delivering the wrong message bent your ass. "Yeah, I could handle that." Cesar grinned. "Smart man. It's always better to have a job set up before you sign the papers." Cesar took a deep breath. "So I'm in? Let me make a few phone calls." Slumping in his chair, Cesar was half convinced his escape plan might work. Thank you.
Awesome, Andre. I
Thank
love
you.
that scene. I love that scene. So you retired. I'm going to ask a couple of questions and we will let people ask. There's some popping up already, but you retired, I think, as a commander.
Yes, I enlisted and did 9.5 years as enlisted, got commissioned, and then retired as a commander.
So your experience, do you think you put some of what you went through to rise in the Navy at the time that you did into this character? Because I love Cesar as a character is so deep and he changes and he has this sense of honor, but he also makes friends with some unlikely people like the cowboy. I love and some other people that he meets along the way that are surprising. Like he hasn't been around a whole lot of white people up to this time in his life, right? From his neighborhood, but he's open. What else do you think makes somebody
he
succeed?
hadn't done a lot of this character hadn't done a lot outside of his neighborhood. So yeah, it's like kissing the fire hydrant for him. That's one thing I noted about the Navy is that every couple of years you're transferring, you're going somewhere else. So you meet all these people and they're on their separate schedule. So you'll go somewhere and you'll know someone for 7 months and then they're gone and somebody else comes in, and it's like a revolving door of people that you meet. And since he didn't have any experience basically of with the world outside of his neighborhood, yeah, it's all quite a lot for him to take in.
But he does a beautiful job of it. He's smart, he listens, you know, he pays attention, he wants to succeed, and he has to make some tough choices along
Yes.
the way too.
Yes.
There's a wonderful scene that I love where he has this teacher who's a white guy who's really smart and really good teacher, and he's, you know, talking to the group and he's very open, but the minute Cesar tries to talk to him and ask a question, he completely ignores him like he doesn't exist.
Right.
And another guy says to him, well, he's racist, you know, just like that, like, well, you know, and that really, I never thought of that kind of silent, horrible racism that he encounters in the book.
Yeah, and that's really, I've experienced that, and probably a lot of people of color have experienced. And yeah, it's not something that you can really prepare for. It's not something that you expect, but it's certainly something that happens a lot, or happened a lot, and probably still happens a lot. And yeah, it was, how do you adjust to that? Because, you know, you have a set idea of what you think racism is, and you can, you know how to react to that. You know, you rehearse it in your head, but when you just indifference like that, and especially the lower expectations that are often superimposed on you. It has nothing to do with you. It's just that, okay, this guy's Black, he's not going to be capable of whatever.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow.
So
yeah, let me see what our
that.
questions are. We have some questions from the audience, so let me see.
Okay. Bring them on.
Here's a good question. I started listening to the book today, and I'm thrilled that I'm listening to your own voice. The book has really grabbed me. Have you narrated other books? You did the Audible yourself. You did the reading. Have you narrated other books?
Well, first I was thrilled that Audible even, because I sent an audition tape, and I was thrilled that they said, hey, yeah, we'll use you. Yeah. So, and it was a fun experience.
Was it difficult? You did some training a little bit, right? And you asked one of our faculty who does book readings and so on, and commercials for advice. Was it difficult?
Yeah. I did do some training in the early 2000s, and did a couple of things, but Ross Clavin, who's on the faculty, and he's a professional voice actor, and so yeah, I got some tips from him, and basically recorded in my bedroom.
I thought that was
closet.
Great.
Yeah,
it's so great that you got to do it. I thought that was really awesome, because very often the writer wants to read and tries out, but doesn't get, you know, that they want to hire professional actors. So that's just great. Here's another question. I agree with most of your statement that today is similar to the 60s, early 70s. What is different today is the general population support of the military. I served in the Air Force from 1968 to 72 and became involved with the GI anti-Vietnam War movement in 1970. By 1970, the military was falling apart from within, and the general population did not support GIs. Vietnam veterans against the war and later veterans for peace reinvigorated the anti-war movement. I see nothing like this in today's general population or in the military. Would you like to comment?
The specific anti-war movement that was taking place in the early 70s, is not really that took the form of anti-military, as in people in the military, and they aimed it at those returning sailors and Army, rather than the administration, which is the one that was pushing the war. So no, we don't have that what we do have is during that civil rights movement, the progress that was made, that it seemed like it was making, and it made people feel like, wow, things are really going to change. And then, of course, they didn't. And we have that feeling now that because of the things that are seen on the internet and people filming all the things that were happening in the 70s, but we didn't have the internet. Uh, uh, for instance, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and there's two newspapers. There's the Columbus Dispatch, which is the major newspaper, and then there was the Black neighborhood paper, which was the Call-in Post. Well, on the Call-in Post, you'd see folks that were shot down and run over and et cetera by the police. And you never saw that stuff in the Columbus Dispatch at all, unless it was on page 20, and it'd be very small. So yeah, they're not completely parallel, but there's suggestions. I mean, there are some things that made it the same to me.
That is an interesting point that the questioner made, because I remember being young, and my father, who'd been in the army in World War II, was he was against Vietnam, but he was so upset at the spitting on the soldiers returning. And he said, don't you ever insult a soldier, or a sailor. And the thing that's so interesting is coming back from that war already traumatized and completely destroyed, your sense of values and everything you thought was true, especially a lot of these guys whose dads were in World War II, came back to that. That's really, I think they come back now and there's more of a sense of indifference, I would say, like nobody pays attention to the needs of the veteran.
I'd say so. And it's interesting, after I retired, I actually worked as a veteran service officer for a nonprofit, and to assist veterans in getting their survivors and getting their benefits. And this was 2014, and a lot of Vietnam guys were just now coming in to try to get their benefits because they had such a sour taste in their mouth from that time period.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another question from Janine Dubik. She says, what was the hardest part of writing the book, Andre?
The hardest part? Ooh. Well, I guess once I got to rewrite number 15, I was wondering if it was ever going to be good enough to get published. I don't know that any one part was the hardest. Trying to make it flow, I guess, would be the hardest. And that's the magic of rewrites. Getting the first draft was challenging, but then you have something to work with. So I suppose finishing the first draft would be the hardest part, but man, you do a lot of rewriting to try and get that flow right.
Isn't that the case? That's so true. Yeah, absolutely. I think rewriting is the whole thing pretty much. It's hard to get that, getting mining the ore, getting it out of the ground, but then you've got to sharpen it, and you got to figure, it's like diamonds, right? You go hunting for diamonds and you bring them up, but that's the backbreaking work. And then it's precision work after that, I think, a lot of times. But your structure was always there, your structure was always there.
Yeah, I really, wish that I could outline things from beginning to end, like some of the folks that we know, but I'm kind of a hybrid now. I still start out with a situation and a character usually, but I guess I was halfway through this book before I really figured out where I wanted to end it, or where the ending was going to take place on the Kitty Hawk. I just had to figure out how to get both characters to that spot.
Right. Okay, here's another question from Mackenzie Cassidy in Florida. The U.S. military seems more diverse today than it's ever been. People of color and women now serving and making up nearly 50%. Are there still racial tensions in the military like you wrote about in the book, or has it gone more underground?
I don't actually, the military was pretty diverse back then. It just wasn't acknowledged. You weren't seeing, I mean, now you saw on the nightly news, usually when they showed the fighting in Vietnam, you always saw people of color because they were sent, they were disproportionately sent to Vietnam. So the diversity that you see now is just because you see it because of the internet and because the television shows that are, you know, they're trying to be more, trying to show more diverse characters. Is it better now? I don't know that there's two answers to that, yes and no. Is it better now simply because, yes, because people are acknowledging it, and that was the whole point to begin with, was to get people to discuss what was going on. But is it better? You still have those low expectations. As I got commissioned initially, the officers, you know, the junior officers were very, very diverse. The first ship I was on, it was like a little United Nations. I mean, we had all kinds of folks, but as I got more senior, there's fewer and fewer. And by the time I became a senior officer, a lot of times I was the only one in the room. So this was late 90s into 2000, and that was still the case. So yes and no.
So that's a very interesting point you're making. You know, I live in a development with many Navy SEALs because the new base is a mile away, and it's all families, and it's a real mix of people, which I was so happy to see that it's really diverse. The Navy SEALs, you know, it's really cool in that sense. You know, and in that sense, I think you're right. So here's another question. Your dialogue is this is from Lori Lowenstein. Your dialogue is so strong, so well done. Any tips for writing great dialogue?
I think I'm not unusual in that I'm a listener. A lot of writers listen, and you know, you meet so many characters in the military. I mean, you know, and if you listen to them, and I used to ride public transportation when I was working downtown, and yeah, I just listen to people, and it somehow bubbles up when I'm writing dialogue. So yeah.
I love your dialogue. I think that's true, that they sound so genuine, all of them, all of the characters in the book, I think. And I love that some people have an ear for dialogue. And I think I don't know if it's natural or if it's just something, it's hard to learn. You know, a lot of times dialogue is like people stand forth and proclaim, you know, very often. And there's none of that here. It's very comfortable. They get to the point, they say either what they mean or they don't say what they mean, but you know, it's very direct, the exchanges.
It's just kind of like that. I guess all writers are kind of schizophrenic in that we have all these people inside of, and the characters actually talk to you. I mean, they really do. I mean, they tell you, like originally, like I said, that when I first had the idea of the book is completely different. The guys from New York, etc. But Cesar said, no, I'm from Florida, and I'm Afro-Cuban. And it's, oh, okay. You roll with it. Yeah.
You trusted him to tell you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, because you kind of know that it's you back there, but yeah.
Yeah, when they do take over, I've had that experience myself, and also with some of the books I've published with the writers, a character just becomes alive. Absolutely. And sometimes takes over and goes in a different direction than expected. And I love when that happens. You have a question from Lisa Grime. Please talk about the process of moving from the first draft to version 15, exclamation point.
Well, as I say, it didn't stop at 15. I just stopped counting at 15. The process, I learned that that old cliche about putting it aside for a couple of weeks and coming back to it really helped a lot, because there was I lost track of how many times I thought, okay, this is the absolute best. There's no way to improve this. And then I come back a couple of weeks later and it's like, well, no, I could do that better. So it's just, can't really describe the process that there's no I had no conscious process of how I got to the end. It was just a lot of rewrites and sending it to the editor, Kaylee. And that's the magic of having a good editor, is that they don't change your voice. They help you say what you want to say better. So working with an editor is certainly a big help as well.
That's very, thank you. That's very nice. I think also what you're talking about too is a certain amount of objectivity, right, on your own work. So it's like a week later or 2 weeks later, you've forgotten exactly maybe what's on the page, and you can come at it with the voice of the, you know, the critic of your own work rather than the creator, you know.
Right.
There's those ups and downs. Like the first day is like, yes, I nailed it. And then that night it's like, oh my God, I don't think, you know, and then you go back and look at it. Hey, it's not as bad as I thought, you know, that process.
And you also have to, you know, when I'm writing anyway, I have to separate that critic. The critic, shut up, you know, just go over here and don't bother me and let me write. And then, as you read it later, then the critic can help you. But when you're writing, the critic's a pain in the butt and you just needs to go away.
Exactly. I try to teach a meditation to my writing students to lock the critic up, you know, during that first pass, because that critic can really like stop you from writing anything at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Here's a question from Jennifer Jenkins. Did you base your characters on real people?
No, this is fiction and I made these people up, but I certainly snatched pieces from people that I knew or met, or, you know, I might not even have known what their name was, but the way they spoke or something. So yeah, I snatched it from a bunch of different folks, but no, I did not. Ada is not a specific person, no.
And Enrique, was he somebody that you based on, or his friend who's very pale, who's Afro-Cuban as well, who's got the blondish hair?
Again, I did not. I actually based his looks on somebody that I knew, but not as to who he is or any of that. No, that kind of flowed from who Cesar turned out to be. So yeah, very
interesting. Yeah, a good friend for him, a good sidekick in the book, you know, terrific. All righty. And a question from Robin Oliveira, wonderful writer. She says, Kaylee mentioned that your character was not autobiographical. You say you begin with the character and a situation. How did your main character come to you? How did Cesar come to you?
It actually, like I said, I had like a skeleton of the character for 10 years ago, but as I was noticing the parallel between the time periods and this character, he has a conundrum. He has to make a decision and none of them are good. Okay, so that was the first, and once I figured out where to start the book, which is always an issue, because he's in this situation, he has to escape, he decides to go in the Navy, but how does he get there? I mean, because you don't want to, you know, you got to build it up, you know, you don't want to tell everything, just data dump who this kid is and all that. You want to make it interesting to read. So it was a trial and error, but yeah, the real starting point was, okay, how does this start? Where am I going to start the book? That was the really hard part. And basically that came from talking to different writers.
How interesting, because he's a reluctant hero. He doesn't really want to join the Navy. He just
No.
really wants to get out of town.
Right.
But he finds a state of grace in some ways. He finds himself
Yeah.
there, which is he
Yeah.
becomes a man, you know.
Yeah. It feeds some things in him that he didn't even realize he was looking for. Yeah.
Right.
Which is how he ended up in the situation he was in the first place, was he was looking for somewhere to belong.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
Here's a question from William White. It says, how does Cesar react and respond to the racism he encounters while in the Navy?
Sorry, say that again.
How does Cesar react and respond to the racism that he encounters while in the Navy?
In the early 70s, and it really comes down to, this is how we got to don't ask, don't tell, is that you can't legislate feelings. You can only legislate what people do. And at that time, a senior petty officer who is treating you like crap is still a senior petty officer. You're a seaman, you're basically nobody. So the idea is that it was like that everywhere. It wasn't just in the military, it was in my hometown. It doesn't matter where I was. You're going to meet those kind of people. And there's nothing that you can react to it. You know, you could punch them in the face or whatever, but then you're the one going to jail, not them. So his reaction is quiet. It looked like quiet acceptance, but he was pissed. I mean, there's a lot of rage that's motivating him on the inside, but you can either let yourself get burned up with that rage, or you can move on. You can do what's best for you and your family. You can try to grow from it, maybe try to avoid those people in the future. But yeah, it was so much of your life that it was not unexpected.
That's a really deep and good answer. Really wonderful. Heather Harlan says, congrats on your novel. What can we look forward to next?
Well, I am working on a second novel, but I'm also working on the screenplay. So now the marketing of this book has been a real experience, and it's had a huge impact on my writing. But yeah, that's but it's not the book is not a follow-on to this book. It's a completely different story. I need some space from these characters, but I'm toying with the idea of coming back with another book from Ada's perspective. So,
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So from his wife, eventually his wife's perspective, or we think they get married, but we're not sure, right? At the end, it seems like he's going back to her, which is always, which feels so good at the end, you know, that he's in love and he's really going to give it a shot. So from her perspective, oh, very interesting. I can't wait. Let me see, there's a question from Laurel Brett. Hi, Andre. I wrote about the same war and the same period. Did you begin with your story, or did you begin with a commitment to the history and writing about that period?
One followed into the other. Like I said, I start out with the character and the situation. And then once I decided, you know, that he would escape into the Navy, and then the history kind of flowed into that. I wanted it to be realistic. So the documents that are in there are, if possible, they were based on real documents and that kind of stuff. When I talk about the investigation that was done afterwards, that's based on a real document. So I just tried to blend the fiction in with some things that actually, if you go on the internet and look them up, you can actually find them and read the whole thing if you want.
Yes, and that was a really, that's an interesting question too, because we did not want the story to be considered a historical novel about
Right.
the race
Right.
rider Kitty Hawk. It just sort
Yeah.
of happens that that's where he is
Mhm.
at the time,
Yeah.
which I think was a very interesting choice and a
Mhm.
difficult choice that you made. But I think it was a perfect place for that denouement, you know, that ending to happen, really.
Yeah, and I tried to be true to the time period. For instance, I even did looked up the census that was done in Florida that time period to see, okay, were there actually Afro-Cubans society in Orlando? And there was. So
Yeah.
I tried to be accurate as far as that went. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Because there's
And
always that one person out there that's going to Google everything, you know?
yes, and then say, no, you got it wrong.
Yeah.
Here's the question. What was your title based on the song of the same name, or was it just a coincidence? I don't know the song.
It was, I became familiar with the song after. No, it's based on the fact that he's faced with a conundrum, and that's a nautical term that addresses that. You're stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea. Well, you got, you know, you got you got a bad decision or a worse decision. That nothing good can come out of it. That's how you ended up in that situation.
Yeah, it really works for this book, I think, for his situation. So
Yeah.
I wanted to say that you can order books from Powell's, and they're signed. Andre signed quite a few. So if you order from Powell's today, you can get a signed copy from Andre. I also want to thank my team. They've been so fantastic. Kristen Ivy and Michelle Polizzi, who've been really helping us navigate through all this social media stuff, which I think is a lot more than we certainly when I was
Yeah.
younger, we never had that as writers. You know, we could all be like, you know, Thomas Pynchon and sit at home and never answer the phone or the door or anything. But now we have to engage, and we do all this. And it's wonderful to have the help of people who really know what they're
Yeah,
talking about.
I have to say that's usually not something that's covered in school. I mean,
Yes.
you don't really think about this because otherwise you might run screaming from the room. But yeah, it's a lot.
Yes, it is. And I'm just so happy that, you know, that we're doing this together, and that we've
Yeah.
had this, even though we're not in person, you know, having this time with you and hearing your thoughts on this, I think are really interesting. It's a really interesting way to do this. And you've made such good points. What was I going to, I think I pretty much all the questions that I have been asked either by me or by others. And so I don't have any more questions, and we don't have any more questions from the audience. Anybody else with a burning desire to speak up now? We have some really nice comments that people seem to be very happy. You've got a fan club here. There's a link on the chat for the book if you'd like to order it. There's a direct link. Let me see if there's anything else that, yes, I think all the questions were in the Q&A box, and so we don't have any more. Andre, do you have any last
No,
last
I've
comments or
really
questions?
enjoyed our chat. It's nice to see you again. I know we were supposed to see each other in January, now we're not. But no, this whole experience has been eye-opening and strangely fun and but painful at the same time. But you know, it has been a dream for a long time, and really happy that it's coming to fruition. And I'm really happy about the writing, falling into a writing community that's so supportive. So I really
Yes,
appreciate
we
that.
do have a wonderful writing community, and many of your friends from Wilkes showed up today.
Yeah.
So that's a lovely
Thanks,
thing.
guys.
And Patty Smith asks if has anybody asked what you're working on now? And you did say a screenplay, and then maybe a follow-up or a book that's about Aida. in the book, right? Which
Yeah.
is which is really interesting. She's also in the Navy, so it's fascinating to see a woman's perspective, a Black woman's perspective from that time.
Yeah.
And Sandra Hextrals asks if the screenplay is sold or if you're just writing it on spec for yourself, or are you in a group with the screenplay?
Well, I'm blessed to actually know some folks who've written or sold screenplays. So I'm once I write it, I'm going to send it to them and see if they think it's worth submitting. And it's always going to be up to you whether or not you're going to do something. But if you have resources, use them. I mean, because and of course you do the same for them.
Yes, yes. And I think that's part of what's wonderful about the Wilkes community is that the support that people give each other is just,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that in a lot of writing programs like that. And I just, I've always loved that about this program. So thank you so much. Is Catherine still here? Wanted to let her finish up on this for us.
And
Great
thank
pleasure.
you so much
Andre.
for
Wonderful
participating in
pleasure.
this. I really appreciate it.
It's so nice to see you. I really enjoyed this.
Yay. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. We all see your fans in the chat, so I'm assuming that when you put out new work, they will come rushing to our stores to purchase it. But yeah, I want to thank you both for joining us tonight. This is such a fun event. Really glad I got to work this for my first event of the year. It's always nice like seeing local debut authors get to have their moment in the sun. I dropped the link to purchase Andre's book in the chat. I'll drop it one more time just in case, because we got a lot of hoopla and fanfare that moved it up a little bit. There you go. And then you can buy Kaylee's books as well. They're also featured in the chat as well. But yeah, everyone. Now we got, sorry. Looks like.
Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it.
Looks like it sounds like it's good. Everyone, please purchase Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, which is autographed. And we'll see you at our next Powell event. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.